Welcome back to Beyond the Helmet. I'm your host, Steve McGrath, and today I am very pleased to be joined by a fellow UMass Amherst grad. I shouldn't say grad, but at least a fellow Minuteman, someone that is a Boston native coming out of Dorchester, none other than former NFL running back Michael Cox. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. When I look, of course, I said that you're from New England. So that's what caught my eye, is knowing that there's someone that is similar enough to me, how I grew up, where I grew up, that they had a route to professional football, which I think is the most important thing that you can do, right? Is relate to someone and say, hey, I'm like you, and I was able to carve this path that might seem like it's impossible. So man, from the jump, I'd love to just ask you, if we can jump back to high school, what were your thoughts? And if I have this right, you didn't play high school necessarily in the Boston area. I think you might have played in Connecticut. But what were your thoughts about playing sports in high school, and how did this road to Ann Arbor, Michigan come about?
I've played sports my whole life, and as far as football goes, I didn't play until later on, until I was about 16. I went to a couple different high schools, and then the last high school I went to was Avon Farm. That was in Connecticut. And actually, I got recruited my first year playing. I had the 1 year under my belt, and ended up getting a lot of scholarships that summer, and I ended up committed to Michigan after they offered me. And yeah, I looked around at all my choices, and I thought Michigan was probably my best situation and spot. I wanted to go to a big football school. I was thinking about Boston College for a while, because honestly, I grew up, I always wanted to go to Boston College. But just at the time, the coaches there, I didn't really, I kind of had a little issue with them. And this is before, obviously, I went there. So I was like, okay, I don't want to go into a situation where there's already kind of, it just seemed a little bit off before even getting there. And so that's kind of what led me to go to Michigan, just because of that relationship. So yeah, that's pretty much how I ended up there.
Well, man, listen, you stack Michigan against anyone, and it's going to be pretty hard to not go to Michigan. So nothing against BC, just in the comp alone.
Yeah.
But from what I could gather, Lloyd Carr would have been the one, his staff anyway, would have been the one that was recruiting you. So if I'm right in that, what was that interaction like? Because of course, Coach Carr's a legend. But B, how much did things change then if by the time you're there, it's Coach Rich Rod?
Yeah, I mean, kind of everything changed, to be honest, because I committed to Lloyd Carr, so I wouldn't, think it was going to be completely something else. And then, he retired, and then Coach Rod came in, and then I was really, doubting if I really was going to go to Michigan still or not. But then actually, Rich Rod actually came and visited me in Boston, and I talked to him, and he convinced me, otherwise, that I should come. And I thought about everything. And honestly, like, Michigan was still Michigan, still big football school. I visited it, I love the environment, like everything about it. Just the only thing I was a little bit unsure about was just, the big coaching change. But after, he visited and everything, I was like, you know what, like, I'm gonna give this a shot, because, I feel like everything else is in place, and I feel like I should still be able to fit in. And, I ended up going.
So yeah, at that point, are you thinking schematically about like how the offense would be run, or is this more just like, are you comfortable with this individual sort of guiding your future?
It was both, but I mean, mostly I would say really was the offense, because that's a big change going from the pro set to spread. And so, that definitely was something, I had to think about. But like, I know, like, my skill set as a player, I could see myself playing in both. I prefer definitely the pro set, but like, as far as the spread goes, I could definitely, I could do it. And so that's kind of the reason I had behind it. So I was like, you know what, even though I'd rather play in a pro set, I like everything else about the school, and the spread I can still do too at a high level. So I ended up sticking with it.
Now, Rich Rod has had plenty of success in his career, but when you look at the time at Michigan, it was not the brightest spot. And of course, I'm not asking you to talk any trash about the guy, but thinking back now with hindsight, why do you think that never got up and running like it could have?
I think with Coach Rod, it was more so he kind of had his mind set on a certain way he wanted to run the program and what he wanted to do. which was a lot different than West Virginia. Like no offense to like West Virginia, which has tons of great players and everything, but I felt like at Michigan we had more talent, just all around the board, and we could spread, I feel like, the ball around more so than opposed to like maybe like a West Virginia or something where it's like, you have like your quarterback and, running back and like one wide receiver or something. That's kind of like the focus, as opposed to all across at Michigan. I mean, every position we were, kind of stacked. Like, we had players at every single position that were top level guys. And I think Coach Rod, he was kind of just used to playing, in West Virginia and over there. But in Michigan, it's a whole different, everything about it is different, Big Ten, run and pound, more pro set type stuff, bigger players. So it was really a complete change for him, but I think he just might not have adapted to the situation as well as I think he maybe should have. He was doing some things that just weren't working, and he just kind of stuck with it, as opposed to being like, okay, like this is not working. Let me, change it up.
Right. Yeah. As fun as Pat White and Steve Slayton were for everyone to watch, it's a different set of circumstances. But fair enough. Mm-hmm. So, just to shift the focus off of the coaches now and back to yourself, you do redshirt, if I have this right, your first year at Michigan. Mm-hmm. And then your redshirt freshman year is when, from what I could see, is where you get the biggest pop on the field, where you're able to, mm-hmm. to rack up some stats. As your career at Michigan goes on, basically as Rich Rod gets further entrenched as the coach there, how does your mind how do you feel about everything and how things are going? And do you have second thoughts? I mean, just being a young guy, and of course you want to get out there and play. How do you deal with, basically not getting everything that you had hoped?
It definitely was tough. One of the toughest, times of my life going through that, because, I came out of high school to Michigan, really thinking that I was going to get to play my freshman year, right off the bat, getting there. And that's, obviously, there's going to be competition, you got to, deserve your spot. But, I went into it, talking to the coaches and everything, saying like, hey, you're going to come here and you're going to play right away. And then obviously that wasn't the case. I redshirted, and then I did get to play, a little bit my freshman year. But it definitely was, like disappointing not getting to play more at Michigan, especially, when I felt like I definitely deserved to play a lot more than what I did.
Yeah, so I don't want to fast forward too far then, but so let's just jump into you getting to UMass. Because today it's like common for the whole grad transfer process, but even though when you did it wasn't that long ago, it just wasn't common in the college landscape to see that. So how did that process go for you, and ultimately why UMass?
I mean, the process it was pretty smooth. It didn't take, it wasn't like too much. But I ended up picking UMass just because it was cool, because I was close to home, which was, nice, just being in Massachusetts. And, I met with the coaches out there and everything. And it was kind of a funny situation too, because, UMass was a traditional pro set offense. And, I knew UMass obviously growing up from Boston and, hearing of them, and they weren't Division 1A, but they were Division 1 AA. And they'd always been like a high, just a very good football school. And we actually had played them, at Michigan a year. I think it was a year prior, before me leaving Michigan. So I literally played against UMass. And I remember specifically, the game was actually close. With the first half, I think we were only up by a field goal, which was surprising, because we're playing, literally at the time, a AA school. And they were literally in the game with us. And I was like, wow, like, they really are, like they're the truth, We ended up, I think, beating them by a lot at the end of the game, but like just still to be that close that first half, I thought was really good. And then specifically with their running back they had, I didn't think he was, necessarily the best player, but the fact that he had over 100 yards versus Michigan and, not necessarily being like the best running back, I was like, okay, that's a big statement. Like, going against a top 10 defense in the country and on a AA school and putting up over 100 yards, like that's legit, And so looking at that, it's like, man, if I played at UMass, like I could put up some real numbers, And And so just remembering that, I was like, I have a great opportunity, and I knew I could go there, and make a big impact right away. And then they recruited me coming out of high school, but I was looking at a lot bigger schools, so I didn't really take them seriously. But coming back around, when I was looking at schools to go to, that's one of the schools I was looking at, and they got a new coaching change too. It's kind of funny, the same thing. They went to a spread as well, which they were traditionally pro set offense. And so same kind of thing. I didn't really necessarily like the spread, but I felt like it would put me in the best position because I knew I was going to play. The coaches, they loved me. It was close to home. So I thought it would still be a great fit for me.
Got it. And by the way, for basically a decade now, UMass has been close in the first half, and they've been blown out in the second half. Like the coaching changes hasn't mattered. Unfortunately, it's been the playbook for a while. I'm hoping that they get over the hump. But so, your 1 year at UMass, you are the best player on the team. I mean, basically all the offensive yardage came through you. And that's not to belittle anyone else on the roster, but it's just you showed up, you saw an opportunity, and you made the most of it. What did it mean the most for you to put up over 80 yards against Michigan? Because of course you play them as a Minuteman. But beyond that, by the time your UMass career is over and you're legitimately forced with what's life after college football, what were your thoughts on, like, did you really think you were going to get drafted, or were you like, hey, maybe this is going to work, maybe not? Do you remember what you were thinking through 2012?
Yeah, I mean, coming out of UMass, I thought I did pretty well, or as good as I could do. Obviously, I wanted to put up better numbers. Our team didn't do the best, only having one win on the season and a ton of injuries. So, I mean, definitely was disappointing. I didn't think that was going to happen, kind of going there like that. But I wanted to do what the main goal of what I wanted to do, which was, just get to play more, put more film on tape, and just show that I could really play in the NFL, So I accomplished that. I didn't necessarily get all the stats and everything I really wanted, but I did good enough. And yes, sorry, what was the question again? Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Just considering your road to that point, I'm sure you were hopeful that you'd get drafted, but were you 100% like, I'm going to make the NFL work, I'm going to give it all I have, or were you just sort of like, hey, maybe I won't get drafted, maybe I'll just be lucky to get an invite? Did you have any expectations?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I mean, like, even just going to UMass, my expectation was, I'm doing this, to go to the NFL, like that is the only option. I didn't necessarily know if I was going to get drafted or not. I didn't really think about that, but I knew I was going to make it to the NFL, and I just thought that would be the best, way to showcase my skills to hopefully to get drafted. And I didn't really have any expectation of getting drafted up until that got closer when after I did the combine and everything and pro day and whatnot. And I was really high on the draft boards, or higher than what I would think. I had like a lot of scouts telling me, oh, you're projected, in the third or fourth round. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good for really only playing like 1 year, or one real full season. So I was definitely excited about that. So I had a feeling that I was going to get drafted, according to all the scouts and everything and all the reports that I had received. But I still, I wasn't sure of anything. And then, with the draft process being a couple of days long, I watched a little bit at first, but it's like, you're sitting there, then you think you're about to get drafted at a certain round or place, coaches calling you, and they're like, yeah, we're thinking about getting, this next pick or whatever. And you're sitting there, and then they don't pick you, and you're like, oh man. And then you got to wait another 20 minutes just for the next pick. And then you look at the next team that might draft you, and it's like another 2 hours you got to wait. So it's a whole kind of process. I think I just kind of, I just didn't think about it. I think I went to play like some video games and stuff during the draft. Literally until they called my name. And I was surprised New York took me. I only talked to them one time before. And even just like in general, after like I think the fourth round, I wasn't, I didn't know if I was going to get drafted. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if I didn't get drafted. But yeah, they ended up calling, and I was excited, drink from true.
So can you just talk me through you get over the, incredible, excitement of getting drafted, and now it's rookie mini camp. You're
Mhm.
there. This is what I have to do. What was the toughest adjustment? Because not that I think you'd ever get starstruck like, oh, that's Eli Manning,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
to be like, these are my peers and these are grown men,
Mhm.
and I got to learn this playbook,
Mhm.
and that's Tom Coughlin, who just led them to a Super Bowl, the year prior.
Mhm.
What was it like for you just getting acclimated?
Um, Honestly, it wasn't really that bad, as far as like the skill set and everything. Obviously, way better athletes in the NFL than in college, but it's, I would say it's more similar to maybe if you play at like a top college, take your top one or two, three guys, and it's just, you got a locker room full of those people, you know. And so it's not necessarily like, everybody's just so much better. It's just like think of the top guys you've ever played against, and everybody is similar to that. Now obviously you have like, your freak athletes and whatnot, but the skill level is a lot closer. So that's kind of the biggest difference. You look at the best player or one of the top guys on your team, and you look at the worst player on your team, and there is not that much of a difference, and that's kind of the difference as opposed to look at college like a top guy, and you look at, an average guy on your team or maybe a below average guy on your team. And there's a big difference between all of that. But in the NFL, it's not, is not very big. And so it's more so a mental game. And so it's like, who makes the least mistakes. So that was the biggest difference. I really, when I got to the NFL, skill wise, physically wise, I was up there with everybody, and I had no issues with that. Like right away, it was really like, to me, it felt like college, but just no school and more free time and got money. Um, but as far as playing wise, like it wasn't too much for me, because although everybody was better, I had a lot better supporting cast, and so it evened out. So it was like, okay, I'm playing against a lot better competition, but I'm playing with a lot better players. So it, as far as difficulty wise, it really wasn't an adjustment for me. But mentally, definitely, like I had to really, learn the game, study the game more. So that was really the hardest part. It wasn't too hard, but it was like you had to really put in a lot more time just to study the game as opposed to college.
And that makes a ton of sense. So you get in, and Kevin Gilbride's the OC, but the following year it's
Mm-hmm.
Coach McAdoo. How much
Mm-hmm.
just trying to acclimate to the NFL and get that playbook down, how much does it throw you off to then the following year? Like, okay, no, new system, new terminology, or were they similar enough that it wasn't horrible starting all over again?
I mean, I could definitely see how it could be difficult. For me personally, I mean, obviously it's a little bit annoying, having to change systems and playbooks. But for me, like my whole career, that's all I did. I mean, I started playing football at the age of 16. So I learned football. Then I went to college. Under Carr Pro Set, whatever had Coach Rod system. Went to Coach Hoke, different system. Went to UMass, different system. Went to the Giants, different system. Got to change the offensive coordinator, different system. So literally every year I played, I had a different system almost. So I was used to it. It was pretty easy for me. It's like once you learn your second language, second or third language, the more languages you learn after that, it's easier. So that's kind of how I looked at it. It wasn't really an issue for me.
Yeah, I heard at some point, now I'm blanking on who, maybe it was Dan Orlovsky, but you get to the point where you just start,
Mhm.
you're thinking not in words, but you're thinking more in like patterns and just the concept. You understand the concept, and
Yeah.
then you just attach the words to it. Once you get the concept, then you just say, okay, this
Uh-huh.
is what this guy calls it.
Exactly. And that's really was a big difference. Like it's kind of funny because when we changed our offense, actually, it was a lot more simple than, playing under Coughlin, as far as like, schematics wise and everything. And you like in the NFL, it's impossible to memorize the whole playbook. You can't memorize the whole play because the playbook is literally it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. It's like memorizing a dictionary. You just can't memorize every single word in it. But what you can do is learn concepts, and the concepts, like if you know the concepts, and then for the most part you'll be right 95% of the time, and the other 5% is you got to memorize. And so it's just memorize the exceptions, but know the concepts, so then you're right 95% of the time. And if you have an issue, at least at me, a running back, for the most part you kind of like ask the quarterback or something. But Yeah, it's just really, learning the concept and understanding, why plays are certain ways. And then you kind of, you end up knowing what to do.
Definitely. And I just got one last question about, particularly being an NFL athlete. Not that you don't know what you're doing when you get there, but you see like a Brandon Jacobs, I mean, you play with a bunch of guys that, at one point or another were accomplished in the league, whether it was, Peyton Hillis, the
Mhm.
BC guy that the school that Andre comes in later.
Yeah.
But I mean, Shaw Jennings, you just get a chance to rub elbows with professionals. How much did
Mhm.
you try to take from them to improve your game, or was it more you focus on your skill set that's different than theirs and you just want to maximize it so you don't care as much about what they're doing? How do you
Mhm.
just walk that line of like fit in but also learn?
With that, I mean, really, I just, I tried to take from what they, knew and just tried to learn from them as, as far as like the playbook goes wise and, just different things that may or may not have helped them, just learning like that. But as far as like the skill set wise, I mean, as a running back, I was, my skill set compared to the other players I was with was definitely different. So I couldn't necessarily play like the way that they played. But what I like though about, like the NFL or even, like summer college, is that really at the end of the day is just, do you get the job done? If you get the job done, you can kind of do whatever you want. And so it wasn't like in the running back room, I have the coach tell me like, hey, you do this, like, did you get the job done? All right, you're good. But if you don't get the job done and you're doing something, in like quote unquote incorrectly or not how they teach you, and then that's really bad. But pretty much like if your way works, they'll go with it. They might not, approve it at first. They'll be like, hey, you're supposed to do this and do that. But if your way works, I mean, there's really nothing they can say, as opposed to maybe college where it's like, they're like, no, you have to do, like my way or we're just not going to play. Like NFL is not really as much like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, to get into what you're doing now, you have to stop playing football. So,
Mm.
I could see that at one point you had broken your leg. Can you just talk a little bit
Mm.
about what that process was like for you, realizing that NFL window was closing? And then how do you then say, this is what I want the next chapter of my life to be?
No, it was really tough. I mean, I'm still kind of like ongoing through it, 4 surgeries.
Wow.
I had an issue with the first surgery I had, so it's been kind of a whole ordeal I've been dealing with. But just like with my downtime, after I've been just like rehabbing and trying to get better and whatnot. But I really just thought about just like life and if I don't go back to football, what would I do? And that's kind of what led me, on a journey where I'm at today with just like being an entrepreneur and starting these businesses and whatnot. So really I just took that time that I had and thought about, what do I really want to do in life, outside of football, because at the end of the day, like my career got to end someday. And so I really just, took the time and really thought about what I really wanted and how I was going to go about it.
Yeah. So when I think of professional athletes, I think of some of the guys that have some of the best work ethic. They're organized because they're used to their time being so organized that
Mm-hmm.
whether they realize it or not, they are perfectly set up to be entrepreneurs when they're no longer in football or whatever the
Mm-hmm.
professional sport is. So did you ever have a doubt that you were going to be an entrepreneur? And ultimately, how do you
Mm-hmm.
find yourself getting to being in the crypto space today?
I mean, I knew my whole life I was going to be an entrepreneur. I mean, since I was 2 years old, I knew I was going to be a pro athlete. And then after that, I remember people would always ask me, when you're a little kid, like, what are you going to be when you grow up? I was like, I want to be a pro athlete. And then people would laugh and be like, okay, yeah, but what do you really want to be? And I was like, well, that's what I'm going to be. But, if I had a second choice, I would do something in business. I'd be a businessman. I don't know what business, exactly it was, but I just love the concept of like a business and, making money and all of that. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, but I always knew I wanted to do something, kind of like just being an entrepreneur. And so ever since I was 2, 3 years old, that's always, always been something I've wanted to do, but I've always been focused on sports. So that was kind of my number one thing. And then when I got injured, that's really was the first time in my life where it's like, wow, like, okay, I can't even play any sports, let alone, football. Um, and so I really, got to get into my other passion I had that I never really, acted out on. And then, oh
So
yeah, with the cryptocurrency, sorry. So how I got into that, actually, one of my friends had told me about Bitcoin, I think it was in like 2015, something like that. But I was still playing football at the time. It was like 2014, 2015, around then. So I was playing football, so I didn't really have the time to learn and whatnot. And I was focused on that. But he was making a lot of money, and he was showing me, and I was like, "This is," and he was just telling me about Bitcoin. I was like, "This really seems like a great kind of concept." And obviously, you're making a lot of money with it, so I got to get involved, and I did. And I made a lot of money off of a little investment. I was like, wow, this is the best investment I've ever made in my life. And I know nothing about, Bitcoin, and I made this. And so that really just got me to think like, wow, like there's something, to this. And, a couple of years have went by and I was still like invested, made some money, lost some money. Um, and then I got injured and I was just thinking like, huh, you know, this is really, I've made the most money with this. So it's like, if I'm in business to make money, and then, why don't I do what makes the most? And that kind of got me just like to focus, like, okay, let me put all my energy into one thing, like kind of same thing with sports, where it's like you get to a certain point where I played every sport growing up. But, when I got to high school and I knew that, okay, I know I'm gonna be a pro football player now. When I was like the first year I played 16, I knew I was gonna go to college to play football. So I was like, okay, let me put all my energy into this. And so kind of the same kind of thing I did in the sports, I did in business. I had all these businesses going on, and I was like, all right, let me focus all my energy into my favorite thing, to what I really want to do. And so that's what I ended up doing just with crypto. And it's really an interesting concept. And I think, it's, no, I don't even think, like, I know it's the future. So it's definitely a cool time to be involved.
It's definitely the future. I mean, it's been on this trajectory, and I think just over the last year, it has completely exploded. So, man, as someone that understands the space, because you've been in it for a while, I mean, I can't even ask you to predict that far into the future, because I feel like it's such an emerging new technology that it's so much is yet to be seen. But do you have any thoughts on where you see, if not Bitcoin, just crypto in general, how this market might go over the maybe just 6 months, but if you have, deeper feelings for where we might be 5 years, 10 years out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really on the verge of a mass adoption, with cryptocurrency. And so the sky's the limit. This is going to go up a lot, for the rest of our lives. This is the beginning of, a paradigm shift. You look at, something like the internet. This is really, what that is, or what like maybe like email is to the internet, right? Where maybe, when it first came out, people might have been like, why would I, send you an email when I can go to the post office, send it for a nickel, and I know it gets to you, right? Like, just during doing email, I gotta get an internet access, I gotta make an email account, gotta send it to somebody, hope they do the same, hope they get it, I don't understand it. But now, literally everybody emails, we text now, we got computers in our hands, and now that's normal. So it's kind of the same thing with Bitcoin, where a lot of people just don't understand it. But it's like, the more you understand it, the more you love it, and the more you realize that, this is the future, and, everything is technology driven. So if you believe that, we're going to continue to evolve and people are going to continue to like technology, and then, this is it.
Now I'm in on Ethereum, but I'm not jumping on the Doge bandwagon. Outside of Bitcoin, do you have any in particular that you actually really feel good about, maybe a year from now?
Yeah, I have so many projects that I really like, really love. Because crypto is cool because you can really, everything that you can do in kind of, quote unquote, like real life, right? They have a cryptocurrency version that's better. Because it's just a cutting edge technology of just, really making the most efficiency of whatever the space is. So I mean, I have projects kind of like all across the board. But one of my favorite ones is, I like Cardano. Just because I feel like of how it's designed, and, everything is, scientifically method, proven, and, voted on, and, it's just very thorough to their whole approach. So I think whenever that does get like fully, functioning, that's going to be, I mean, it already is one of the major cryptocurrencies, but I feel like that's really going to be a great project.
Well, all right. Some stuff to chew on. I got to bone up with my Cardano. But Michael, as we wrap this up, I just got a couple quick questions for you. I need you to go through the gauntlet. So just for one last time, put on the shoulder pads, strap on the helmet. What's most important? Is it having the number one offense or number one defense?
That's a tough one. Being an offensive player, like I really want to say the offense, but I feel like, if they can't put points on you, then you can't win the game, right? So I gotta go with defense. Although I want to say offense, but yeah, I gotta go with defense on this one.
I mean, you're sounding like a guy that played for Tom Coughlin, and you knew how those
Yeah.
Super Bowls were won.
hmm
Now, when you look back at it all, do you have a favorite football memory?
Favorite football memory. I can't say I have a specific favorite, but I guess just like specific, just like times, just maybe like my first like games playing, or just really, I mean, the whole thing, just like being with my team and just training to playing games, just the whole experience. I mean, I can't say there was like one specific time where it was like this is my favorite memory, but I mean, just all of it. I remember a lot of it, and it just it was one of the best times of my life.
Now, when you were pregame, was there ever like just one song, even if it was just for a small stretch of time, that on the playlist you
Mhm.
had to get it in before you went out there?
Oh man, I can't even remember. I had so many songs. There's so many songs that I like, but I know a lot of Meek Mill songs were definitely in there. But yeah, there were so many songs. There's so many songs. I can't remember any off the top of my head right now.
That's fine. And you know
Mhm.
what? I shouldn't be trying to squeeze it in this quick hitter segment, but I should have asked
Mhm.
it and I'd skipped over it. But I
Mhm.
didn't even ask about Brady Hoke. He was the one
Mhm.
that like bang, Michigan goes 11-2 once he steps in.
Mhm.
So whether it's looking at him, Tom Coughlin obviously has had a lot of success at the NFL level. Were
Mhm.
there any particular traits from coaches when you think now, just being someone that runs your own business, did you see anything that
Mhm.
guys that were essentially CEOs of the
Mhm.
team,
Yeah.
what they did that made them successful? Anything that you were able to implement it in your own life?
Yeah. Like I know, like at Michigan, when we had like that 11-2 season, my last year there, I thought Coach Hoke did, a really good job. And I think like one of the differences that made him better was I felt like he better adapted to the players and, kind of listened to guys a little bit more and, you know, just made this stuff that just, worked. And if it didn't work, and then, he would change it up. So I felt like he was just more, adaptive. And just in my life, I would say just in football, what I've, really taken from it, just, working well as a team, being able to work with, everybody on the team, regardless of if, you guys get along or not or whatever it is. It's like you guys all have one goal. And so, let's get there. And then just, working hard, off season, you train all year long, you know, to play once a week for, a couple months, and that was really just like that dedication and being able to, look at, or remember what the goal is, why you're going through all of it and just to give your all. So just taking that, kind of like attitude and, like warrior, like mindset, like, you know, we're going in there, like, I'm putting my body on the line, my life on the line for this game. And then, I applied that to business where it's like, okay, I want to put everything I can into this, So kind of just that
Love it.
mentality.
Love it. What's most important? Is it the players or is it the scheme?
Uh, that's tough. Like I gotta say, because the thing is though too is like you could say the scheme, but how's it implemented? You can have the best scheme, but if the players don't do the scheme, and then none of that matters. Um, but yeah, that's tough. I think it's definitely a mix. Um, but if I had to choose, I'd have to say more so I have to lean a little bit with the scheme. Like I kind of feel like, for example, you look at like the Patriots, for example, right? Minus last year, but before like last 20 years, right? Like they've been an elite team, and they haven't necessarily had the best players. They've had, a couple guys that are, pretty good. Um, but they haven't, they don't come in every year having guys getting paid 100, $200 million, like, all these super loaded contracts and people for the most part, but they're always a top team. And I think that's, through the coaching and, the scheme and how it's implemented and people really knowing their roles as opposed to having a team with a whole bunch of great players, which ideally you want to have great players and a great scheme. That's obviously, I feel like that's the best of both worlds. But, I feel like it's always a trade-off. So it's like you have a whole bunch of great players, and then maybe some other problems arise that you may or may not be able to get through. But I'll have to give like the slight edge to the scheme.
Certainly no right or wrong answer there. I think you did
Yeah.
as good as anyone trying to
Yeah.
wrestle
Yeah.
wrestle it down. Well, man, to wrap this up, I saved the most important question for last. And it's given everything that you were able to do as an athlete, take those lessons and apply it to your business life after being an athlete. What's the best piece of advice that you'd give to a young 16, 17-year-old student athlete that says, hey, man, how do I get there? How do I do that?
Honestly, I think it's just, having dedication, and just really doing your research. And obviously, you do have to be realistic, but you can do, whatever you want to do. But you got to be willing to put in that dedication and to understand, just, what is going to be required of you. And, you really got to do something you love, because if you're going to do something at a high level, like go play Division I or go professional, you're really going to want to, love it, because life is already hard enough. So if you're doing something at a high level, like, you better love it, because it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And if you don't love it, you're not going to want to get through it, and you probably won't get through it.
All right. Got to have a passion. You got to have a passion. Well,
Mm.
Michael, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really do appreciate it. Is there any place that anyone can find you on social media?
Yeah. My Instagram is CoxM29, just COXM29.
All right. We'll throw that in the bio when we put this up. Michael Cox, thank you so much for hanging out.
No problem.